Hello and welcome to today's topic. This is going to be a good one. So I recommend that you grab a notepad, you grab something to take notes with, because we're going to talk about anxiety. And specifically, we're going to talk about anxiety and how it relates to recovering from dieting, recovering from restricted eating, recovering from starting to eat your previously forbidden foods. So if any of those things sound like you, and you are someone who tends to kind of be more anxious in these scenarios, then you're definitely going to want to tune in to today's topic. So grab your notepad, grab something to write with, grab your drink. I've got my water because it's so hot in Austin right now. I need like all the water. So I'm calling this topic today, simple ways to cope with the anxiety that surfaces from restricted eating and from a history of dieting. First, I just want to really define dieting again for us, because I think it's so easy to think that we are not actually engaged in dieting or not even engaged in dieting mentality. So let's just define dieting really quick so we're all like super clear what this word means. So dieting is anytime you're changing your eating and or your movement in order to shrink your body, also known as weight loss, fat loss, making yourself smaller. Okay, so that's what dieting is. And restricted eating is a way of dieting. And sometimes we think we're not doing restricted eating, but we really are. Restricted eating can be not just restricting the amounts that you're eating, it can be restricting the time of day that you're eating, i.e. fasting protocols. It can be restricting the type of food that you eat, your allowed foods. It can be restricting the amounts that you eat, it can be restricting the frequency that you eat things, etc. So restricted eating is a form of dieting. Restricted eating, dieting, same thing. And sometimes we are not actively engaged in dieting behaviors. We might even be like, Heather, like I am not dieting. I'm doing the opposite of dieting. I'm eating everything. I feel like I need some guardrails. I feel like I need some type of control. But what you're still engaged in is what I call dieting mentality. So even if you don't feel like you are actively engaged in dieting behaviors, you are still steeped in dieting mentality. You are still feeling deep body dissatisfaction. Body dissatisfaction is the root of dieting. You're feeling like your body should be smaller. You're feeling like your body should look different, like you shouldn't have cellulite or you shouldn't have dimples on your thighs. Okay, anybody? So these are ways that dieting mentality can infiltrate our thinking. And so if you are somebody who's been like curious about intuitive eating, maybe you've tried intuitive eating, and what the first thing that comes up is just like deep anxiety about it. Like, wait, like intuitive eating, that sounds like eating with no rules. Like, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. Like, how is this going to help me? Maybe you're fearing that you're going to like worsen your binge eating. Maybe you fear like you're just going to be eating all the pizza all the time, or you're going to go overboard on cookies, or you're just not going to have any type of guardrails for your eating. So it's very normal to have anxiety pop up when you are contemplating intuitive eating, or you are have tried it, or you're engaged in it. And I know from both professional and personal experience, because this is a very normal experience that lots of people have, and it's also an experience that I personally had when I was learning to intuitive eat. So I've learned some great tools, both professionally in my certification, and also just personally on the ground. So I want to share a couple of the tools with you and kind of walk you through this process. So here's the first thing. Maybe you've tried to do intuitive eating on your own and you felt like it didn't work for you, or it created a lot of anxiety. The first thing I want to tell you is you might not have actually been doing intuitive eating. So intuitive eating actually has 10 principles. It's a evidence-based process. It has a ton of research validating its methodology. And I hear this kind of language from a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, like I do intuitive eating. And then I also see them still engaged in dieting mentality and dieting behaviors. And that's my first clue that they're actually not using the 10 principles of intuitive eating, because the first principle of intuitive eating is to reject the diet mentality. And so maybe you've tried intuitive eating and you felt like it created a lot of anxiety, but I'm here to tell you that you probably maybe didn't actually do intuitive eating. So if you didn't follow 10 principles, if you didn't work with a certified intuitive eating counselor, if you didn't work with someone who's trained in the principles, then you probably didn't actually do intuitive eating. So we don't know if it actually works for you or not because you didn't actually do it. You might have tried intuitive eating and you might have tried to habituate foods, which is one of the principles and methods that we teach in intuitive eating for recovering from binge eating and food obsession. You might have tried to habituate foods and you might have felt like you failed. And there's two things that could really be causing that. One is that you tried to habituate your scariest, hardest foods first. I will tell you, intuitive eating and healing from diet culture is not like a quick fix. It is work. It's inner work. It is external work. It's healing work. It's super empowering. It's super fulfilling, but it is a journey. I used to binge eat cookie dough, and I did not start with cookie dough in my habituation process. I started with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which I talked about in an earlier topic last week if you want to watch that video. But I saved cookie dough until I'd been intuitive eating for 9 months to habituate. So I share this with you because I think a lot of people don't know how to habituate properly, and they habituate foods in a way that creates a lot of anxiety. Okay? So you might have tried to habituate your hardest foods first, and you might have thought you were habituating foods, but you actually still had a bunch of food rules around your habituation, okay? So you might have felt like you habituated a food, but actually you still had a bunch of sneaky food rules, because diet mentality is really sneaky, y'all, and it's always trying to sneak into our minds and take control of us, okay? So why that's not working is if you don't habituate in like a systematic process and in a way that is empowering to you, then you can have a tremendous amount of anxiety. It can worsen your body dissatisfaction. It can worsen your fear. You can reject the intuitive eating process and delay your healing from dieting culture. So it's really important that you have tools, because otherwise your anxiety will go through the roof, your despair, your frustration will go through the roof, and you'll feel like it's ineffective and you're not healing, okay? So the counterintuitive thing that you really need to do is you need to push in. You need to push in harder. You need to deal with your anxiety. You need to feel the anxiety and keep going. Y'all know what exposure therapy is, right? Intuitive eating is a form of exposure therapy. And habituation is a form of exposure therapy to help you recover from the anxiety and fear that dieting culture and dieting mentality has instilled in us to be scared of foods and scared of weight gain, etc. And exposure therapy works, y'all. They use it to help people heal from a myriad of different things, from airplanes and snakes and spiders, right? Exposure therapy works, where we are exposing ourselves to the stimulus that scares us in a controlled, safe fashion that helps us learn that that thing is not as threatening as we thought it was. Okay. So also you need to understand that anxiety is really a fear of the future. Anxiety is fearing things that haven't even happened yet. I know, because I'm a master at anxiety, all right? Raise your hand if you also have experienced anxiety. And so we have to understand that it's we're not being fully present when we are experiencing that anxiety. So you just need to really expose yourself. You need to go deeper in. So let's talk about some of the tools that actually really work to help when you're in anxiety as you recover from eating your forbidden foods. The first thing is like you have to habituate properly. You need someone to guide you through habituation and that process. You need to actually have a like method for habituating foods where you're not just diving off the deep end. That will help your anxiety and it will help you stick with it. Imagine that you're trying to habituate you're trying to like heal from your fear of snakes. I do not like snakes, okay? So I haven't actually done exposure therapy with snakes, but we're just going to use it as an example. So imagine that I'm trying to do exposure therapy with snakes to heal my fear, and the very first snake that I touch is like a rattlesnake. Like, no, not going to happen, like running in fear. But if the first snake that I interact with is a little tiny, like non-poisonous, like little garter snake, right? Like that is going to be much easier for me to handle. And then because my anxiety will only spike a little bit, I'll be able to like eventually lower it to 0 and then it get exposed to the next thing. It's the same way with your foods, your forbidden foods. The foods that you feel the most out of control around, the foods that you obsess about, the foods that you feel you're addicted to, the foods that you feel like you binge on all the time. Those foods need to be habituated later in the process. And so there's a whole process for habituation. So that's one of the first things you need. You also need to have good tools around self-talk. So even with like all the clients I've worked with over the years, even when they're doing great, they like still have negative self-talk about their progress. And so I have to always come in and reinforce what they're doing well and then like teach them and encourage them how to do positive self-talk. So this is a skill that you usually develop hopefully in childhood if you're modeled it, but a lot of us aren't modeled good self-talk because our parents are talking negatively about themselves to themselves, even if they're talking positively to us. And so then we're modeled that. And as adults, we have to actually learn the skill of positive self-talk. So that's one of the things you need. You need someone to help you reframe things and help you see your progress from the outside. I know for me, when I was going through intuitive eating, I felt like I was not healing. I had moments where I felt like it wasn't working. I had moments where I wanted to quit. I had moments where I reverted back to my dieting behaviors temporarily because of the fear and anxiety that was coming up around gaining some weight as I healed from dieting. And that is just part of the healing process, okay? But I do know that like having a coach and having somebody on the outside to be like, Heather, you're doing great. Look how much progress you've made. Look at all the like healing you've done. That was able to ground me in reality about like where I am and what I'm accomplishing. And it allowed me to press further into my healing journey and actually like achieve freedom, which is like, I just can't get over it. Like intuitive eating is like one of the best things I've ever done for myself from a healing perspective because it's so layered and deep. You also need to learn how to resolve fear. I teach my clients a great exercise called the fear resolution exercise. It's something I use for myself. It's super powerful and simple, and it's a daily practice you can do to help yourself move through fear. Also using cognitive behavioral therapy tools. So that's a part of my program too, where I'm teaching my clients how to use CBT to work through fears and negative thoughts. Also, having role models, right? Like you need role models if you are going to do tough things. If you are scared of flying, it helps to like have a buddy next to you who's not scared of flying, right? If you're scared of like overeating the pizza, it's helpful to have a friend who's like, oh, I eat pizza like every week and like I don't overeat it. It's helpful to have role models. It's helpful to have community. It's helpful to have camaraderie. And that's one of the things that I also provide in my program with my clients is being a role model myself, but then also a community of other women who are going through it with you. And you need to really think about like, you need to be prepared to be courageous if you are engaging in an intuitive eating journey, if you're healing from dieting mentality and dieting behaviors, if you want to break the yo-yo dieting cycle, if you want to stop weight cycling, if you want to stop being obsessed with food, you have to be prepared to be courageous. This work isn't easy. There's a reason that a lot of people aren't doing it for themselves because it's not easy. And that's why I'm teaching it, because it's impactful work. This is why, like, I never wanted to do like meal plans for people. Like that was never my passion. I wanted to help people heal from the inside out, right? And so you have to be prepared to be courageous as you step forward into this healing journey. Okay? So let's just kind of review some of the things that you should be prepared for as you embark on a healing journey from dieting. One, remember that dieting is sneaky, and things that you think aren't dieting are dieting, or things that you think aren't dieting behavior are at least dieting mentality. So you can be engaged in dieting behavior and or dieting mentality. You can be engaged in restricted eating patterns and not realize it, and those can all be really detrimental to your mental and emotional health. It's normal to have anxiety as you embark on a food freedom healing journey, as you embark in intuitive eating. You have to push into the anxiety. You have to prepare yourself for exposure therapy. You have to prepare yourself to be courageous and like know yourself as somebody who can feel the fear and push in and make progress on your journey. And then you have to know that like you need skills and tools. Like you need to know how to habituate foods properly. You need a system. You need tools for resolving anxiety like fear resolution, CBT. You need role models. You need community. It's not something that I recommend embarking on by yourself. I'm a professional coach. I'm a health coach, a nutritionist, a registered nurse, and I hired a coach to help me do this work. That's how challenging it can be. Thank you so much for tuning in today and listening to today's episode. I hope it was inspiring to you. I hope you learned something. If you have questions about this, please send me a message on Instagram at Heather McConaughey. That's the best place to reach me. You can just always slide into my DMs. And I really look forward to sharing more with you each week about this topic. It's something that I feel really passionately about, and I'm excited to keep sharing it with y'all. Okay, thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you soon.